They called him the ghost of Hollow Creek, not because he haunted people, but because no one could catch him, no one could tame him, and yet he was always there, watching, waiting, lurking just beyond the tree line. Locals said he appeared every dusk, ragged, mud-caked fur, one ear torn, eyes like dying embers. You could feel him more than see him. And if you dared to get close, he'd vanish, like smoke in the wind. That he didn't growl. He didn't bark. He just stared, as if he knew something about you, as if he was judging your soul. Then he'd turn away, slip back into the forest, and melt into silence. First, they thought he was just another stray. Then someone found claw marks around the old mill ruins. A broken collar half buried in mud. A trail of paw prints leading nowhere. And finally, a small, red scarf. Faded, dirt-stained, torn at the corner. That scarf belonged to Emily Carter, the little girl who vanished a year ago. No body was found. No trace. Just a backpack near the river. Everyone assumed the worst. Some whispered she ran away. Some said she drowned. Her parents stopped talking altogether, and then the ghost dog showed up. People thought it was coincidence. But the timing, it didn't add up. The dog had never been seen before her disappearance. And now, he was always near Hollow Creek. Always near. Where she was last seen, the town of East Pine was small. The kind where everyone knew everyone. The kind where secrets didn't stay buried for long. Except this one. The town had buried a little girl in its memory and moved on. But the dog hadn't. The ranger, Lucas Hayes, spotted him first, sitting on the ridge at sunset. Still, silent, watching the water. When Lucas took a step forward, the dog growled. Low, not threatening. More like warning that he left food the next day. Raw chicken. The dog didn't touch it, but the day after that, a worn-out baby sock was found lying on top of the bowl. Lucas didn't understand that a week later, a trail camera captured something impossible. The dog, sitting beside a small figure in a tattered hoodie. The figure was turned away, but tiny, barefoot, and still, the footage was grainy, but the timestamp was real. Lucas showed the sheriff. The sheriff laughed. Probably someone's runaway kid camping out, he said. But Lucas knew what he so did. Elise Morgan, the town's old veterinarian, who'd been quietly feeding strays for 30 years. She tried to get close to the dog once. There's pain in his eyes, she said. The kind you can't train out. The kind only loyalty causes. Word spread, as it always does in small towns. Kids dared each other to spot the ghost dog. Adults shook their heads and changed the subject. Only a few people still cared. And then came the scream that a couple hiking off-trail reported hearing. It, soft, high-pitched, and panicked. They ran toward it, but all they found was a paw print in the mud and tiny human footprints leading into the woods. That's when everything changed. Search parties were called again. Drones flew overhead. Dogs were brought in, but none of them could track her. Except maybe one. That night, Lucas returned to the trail. He stood alone with the scarf in hand and whispered into the woods. If you're out there, she needs help. We need you. For a moment, nothing. Then from the trees, two glowing eyes appeared. The dog stepped out, slow and wary. He didn't bark. He didn't run. He walked past Lucas, brushed the man's leg gently with his tail, and continued down the trail, looking back just once. An invitation. Lucas followed. For hours, they moved through thorn and frost and black silence. Until, finally, the dog stopped, and there she was, huddled against an old pine tree, curled up in leaves and torn blankets. Her face pale, her lips cracked, her arms around the dog. Emily Carter, the girl who vanished. The dog looked up at Lucas, then gently rested, his head on her lap. She opened her eyes and whispered, voice like wind breaking through fog, "Don't take him away. He's the only one who kept me safe." And then, she fainted. The forest went quiet. Even the wind stopped moving, because in that moment, Lucas Hayes realized something chilling. This wasn't a rescue. This was a story trying to stay hidden, and the dog, the one they feared, the one they ignored, was never the threat. He was the only one who knew the truth, and now, so did Lucas. They called in the medics. Emily was half-conscious, whispering fragments that didn't make sense. Her eyes darted to the dog every few seconds, clinging to him like he was the last thing keeping her heart beating. And maybe he was. The EMT reached out to lift her, but the dog, still unnamed, still untamed, let out a growl so low it rattled the leaves. His eyes locked onto the man's hand, muscles tense, ready to defend her with the last breath in his broken, scarred body. Lucas stepped in slowly, voice calm. "It's okay, buddy. They're here to help her. You did good. Real good." It was the first time the dog didn't retreat that Emily's voice cracked like dry wood. "Don't leave him, please." They took her to County General, and Lucas rode in the ambulance with her, holding her cold fingers. The dog, bleeding from his paw, limped behind the vehicle all the way to the edge of town before disappearing into the woods again in O'Collar. No microchip, no name, but Emily knew him. She called him Buddy, and that's when people started asking questions, because that name wasn't random. 3 years earlier, the Carters had adopted a mutt from the county shelter. A quiet, reddish-brown pup with big ears and a tail that wagged only when Emily was near. She named him Buddy, but 6 months later, Buddy disappeared, vanished from their fenced yard. No one could explain it. The family put up posters. Emily cried for days. The police assumed it was coyotes or a thief. Her father said coldly, "Dogs run off. That's what they do." But what if Buddy hadn't run? What if he'd been thrown out? The pieces didn't fit until Emily woke up, 3 days later, wrapped in blankets, face pale but alert. She wouldn't speak much, but when a nurse offered her a stuffed animal, she whispered, "No, I want the real one." They let Lucas sit with her, the only one she seemed to trust. She didn't say much at first, just stared out the window, until Lucas asked gently, "How long were you out there?" She didn't answer directly. She just said, "He brought me food. Dead birds, sometimes. Once a rabbit. He'd wait until I fell asleep before leaving." Lucas blinked. "You're talking about Buddy?" She nodded. "He never left. Even when I was sick. Even when I cried at night. He kept me warm when it snowed." "Why didn't you come home?" Lucas asked carefully. Her little fingers clutched the sheet tightly. "Because home was where the bad things happened." And just like that, the story shifted. This wasn't just a lost child case. It was something much darker. Lucas requested full access to Emily's case file, but it was sealed. Officially, her disappearance was still being treated as a tragic accident. But now, something in her silence, something in Buddy's haunting eyes, said otherwise. Back in the woods, Lucas returned to the spot where she was found. The blankets, the trail, even a small pile of pine cones shaped into a crude shelter, and paw prints. Deep ones, all around. No human footprints. No other animals. Just Buddy's, which meant one thing. She hadn't survived on her own. Buddy had kept her alive. A 9-year-old girl, gone for nearly a year, survived in the wild. And the only clue they'd had was a dog everyone had tried to chase away. That night, Lucas left food again by the tree line. But this time, a camera, too. He didn't expect what came back. The footage showed Buddy arriving just after midnight, limping, his side still wounded. But he didn't eat the food. He sniffed it, circled it, then walked 5 feet away and dropped something at the base of the tree. A photograph, water-stained, crumpled, but still clear. A picture of Emily, no more than 7 years old, sitting on a man's lap. A man whose name hadn't come up yet in the investigation. Lucas's hands shook as he recognized the man. Tom Carter, Emily's father. Officially, he had been ruled out early in the investigation. Alibi checked. Phone records clean. But this photograph, this changed things, because Emily didn't carry a backpack when she vanished. She didn't take anything, which meant someone had brought this photo back to the forest or hid it there. But why would Buddy bring it back now? Was it a message or a warning? Lucas brought the photo to the sheriff the next morning. Sheriff Dawson scoffed. "This came from a dog? Come on, Lucas. You're chasing ghost stories." Lucas stared him down. "Then why is a child alive today?" Dawson didn't answer. He just told Lucas to stand down. But Lucas didn't. He returned to the hospital. Sat with Emily again. This time, she was coloring. Lucas placed the photo on the tray beside her. "Do you know this picture?" Her hand froze. The crayon broke in half. She nodded, very slowly. "That's my old picture. It was on the shelf. He took it before he got mad." "Who?" Lucas asked gently. She looked up, her eyes darker than any child's should be. "Daddy." And then, she whispered the part that made Lucas's blood run cold. "He didn't want Buddy to protect me." That night, the sky over East Pines split open with thunder. Rain slammed the rooftops. And deep in the forest, a lone dog howled not in fear, but fury, because the truth was rising, and Buddy wasn't done protecting her. Not yet. The storm raged through East Pine like a warning from the sky itself. Lightning cracked above the pines, splitting darkness in jagged streaks. The hospital windows rattled. But inside room 212, Emily slept soundly for the first time in days. Curled into a ball, her fingers clutching a worn brown blanket. It wasn't hospital-issued. It was something Buddy had dragged with him, something she wouldn't let go. Lucas stayed in the hallway that he couldn't sleep. Not after what she'd said. Daddy didn't want Buddy to protect me. It echoed in his mind like thunder that never stopped. Tom Carter. Respected in town. A quiet man. Clean record. After Emily disappeared, he'd stood outside churches holding vigils. Held interviews. Cried on television. But sometimes grief can wear a mask. Lucas needed answers. And the only one who had them wasn't talking. Until now. Early the next morning, Lucas received a call from Elise, the retired vet who had tried to approach Buddy weeks ago. Her voice was trembling. He's back, Lucas. He came to my porch, and he's hurt. Lucas didn't wait. He grabbed his coat and drove through the mist-covered streets as dawn painted the town in muted orange. When he arrived, Buddy was lying by the porch swing. Soaked. Bleeding. His breathing was shallow, but his eyes? Still fierce. Still focused. Let me wrap the wound, Elise whispered. It's deep, like from a nail or wire. Lucas knelt beside the dog. He came for help. He knew where to go. Elise nodded. He's not just smart, Lucas. He remembers. Lucas noticed something. Tied around Buddy's neck, hidden under soaked fur, a strip of red flannel. And sewn into it, a small child's bracelet. Emily's name was etched into the plastic beads. Lucas took it and looked at Buddy. Where did you get this? Buddy whimpered softly, then tried to stand, but Elise stopped him. Not yet. He needs rest. Lucas stayed for hours. He watched the dog drift in and out of sleep, paws twitching, tail moving once or twice. Dreams. Memories. Battles no one could see but him. Later that afternoon, the sheriff showed up. You've been busy, Sheriff. Dawson muttered. You're creating panic over a dog. Lucas handed him the bracelet. She wore this the day she vanished. He brought it back. She didn't have it when we found her. Dawson studied it. His jaw clenched. That doesn't prove anything. She told me her dad was hurting her. That he got mad. That Buddy tried to stop him. Dawson looked away. She's been through trauma. Kids remember things wrong. Lucas didn't blink. Or they remember them too well. But Dawson was already turning. Unless you've got hard evidence, you're chasing shadows. That night, Lucas reviewed all the original case files. And something stood out. Tom Carter had called in Emily's disappearance an hour after sunset. He claimed she'd gone to the backyard to play, and when he checked on her, she was gone. But there were no signs of struggle. No open gate. No prints leading out, and strangely, no mention of Buddy. Not once. Even though they'd had him for months. Even though Emily adored him. Why erase the dog from the story? Unless he was the problem. Unless he'd seen something or done something to stop what was happening. Lucas needed someone who could connect the dots, quietly. So he drove to the outskirts of town to meet an old friend, Marion Green, a retired child psychologist who had helped with cases years ago. He played Emily's voice recordings, her drawings, the way she flinched at loud sounds, the way she trusted no one but the dog. Marion sat quietly for a long time. Then she said, children speak in pieces. But she's showing you everything. She was controlled, scared, likely isolated. And the dog was her only constant. Lucas asked, what would cause a child to run away into the woods and stay there? Marion didn't hesitate. Something worse than starvation. Back at Elise's house, Buddy was moving again. Stronger, he stood on shaky legs and looked to the woods like he had a destination in mind. Lucas followed him. They moved through trees like whispers, down paths no one had walked in months. Buddy stopped often, sniffed, checked the wind, and always looked back to make sure Lucas was still with him. Then they reached a clearing behind the Carter property, and a shed, old, weather-worn, padlocked. But Buddy growled, not like before. This was different. This was fury. Lucas forced the lock. The door creaked open. Inside, the air was thick, dust and rot and something metallic. And then Lucas saw it. Torn clothing, a dirty mattress, child-sized handprints on the wooden wall. Scratched into the paint, he staggered back. This wasn't where she went. This was where she was kept. Buddy stood in the doorway, motionless, his eyes fixed on the back of the shed, where claw marks covered the doorframe. Deep ones. Angry. Desperate. That's when Lucas noticed the blood on the far wall. Old. Faded. But still there. He took photos. Every inch. Every mark. And when he turned to leave, Buddy didn't follow. Instead, the dog walked around to the back of the shed and began to dig. It didn't take long. 0.6 inches beneath the soil, Lucas's fingers hit something solid. A tin lunchbox. Inside, a broken key, 2 torn photos, and a locket with Emily's initials. Evidence and buried truth. When Lucas returned to town, Buddy at his side, he knew there was no going back. This wasn't just a missing child case anymore. This was the unraveling of a lie. One man's mask was about to fall, and a dog, abandoned, unwanted, forgotten, had been guarding the truth. The wind had shifted. In small towns like East Pine, the air carries more than just weather. It carries secrets, whispers, and sometimes the kind of silence that hurts your ears. Tom Carter stood on his porch that morning with a coffee in hand and the same calm expression he always wore. To everyone else, he looked like a man rebuilding, still grieving the return of a daughter who no longer looked him in the eye. But to Lucas, that calm was a lie, because behind the scenes, something had started to crack. Lucas handed over the photos, the tin box, and every detail from the shed to Sheriff Dawson. The shed behind Tom's own property, but Dawson hesitated, as if the truth was too heavy to carry. "We need more," Dawson said quietly. "Something that can't be denied." So Lucas turned to the only 2 beings who knew the whole truth, the girl and the dog. Emily hadn't spoken to her father since arriving at the hospital. She refused to. She turned her face to the wall whenever his name was mentioned. Even with therapy, she clung to Buddy's blanket like it was the only thing anchoring her to safety. Lucas visited her again. Gently, slowly. He asked her what happened the night she disappeared. At first, she didn't want to remember. Her voice trembled. But then, she began. He was yelling again. About the noise. About the dog. She looked down at her hands. "I tried to hide under the bed, but he dragged me out. He grabbed Buddy. He was going to hurt him." I screamed. Buddy bit him. Lucas's breath caught. She looked at him with eyes too old for her age. "He kicked Buddy so hard. Threw him outside. Said if I told anyone, he'd do worse." Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. I waited until he fell asleep. Then I climbed out the window. Buddy was waiting. I didn't even have shoes. I just ran. And he ran with me. She looked up. He never let me go back. Lucas's hands tightened around the arms of the chair. It was enough. More than enough. But when they brought it to Sheriff Dawson, the man shook his head. "The judge will say she was coached. There's no timestamp. No confirmation." Lucas nearly slammed his fist on the desk. "She was 9, living in the woods, with a dog, for almost a year." "I believe you," Dawson said. "But belief isn't enough in court." Lucas stared at him, and for the first time, felt alone. So he went back to the source. Buddy, the dog, was healing, eating again, his eyes a little softer now that Emily was safe. But he still paced at night, still barked once at 2:17 a.m. every morning. As if remembering something, Lucas had an idea. He returned to the shed with a blacklight, gloves, and a recorder. The goal, undeniable evidence. And there, hidden beneath chipped paint behind a loose plank, was what he needed. A child's drawing. Stuck in a tear in the wood, it showed a stick figure man, angry face, big hands. A child with tears, and a dog drawn bigger than both, standing between them. Underneath, a single word scrawled in block letters: safe. Lucas took it straight to Marion Green. She examined it carefully. This wasn't recent. Look at the wear on the paper. The fading. This was done months ago. She hid it. Lucas's voice cracked. Then why didn't anyone look? Marion sighed. Because people want monsters to look like monsters. But they often don't. Tom Carter still walked the streets like a grieving father, still waved at neighbors, still volunteered at the church. But when Lucas showed Emily the drawing, her eyes widened. She touched it gently. "I remember. I made that when Buddy found me food for the first time." That night, Lucas returned to the Carter house. He stood at the edge of the property with Buddy beside him. Tom stepped out. They stared at each other in silence until Tom said, "Should have left that mutt to rot." Buddy growled. Not like before. This time it was guttural, deep. And Lucas saw it. The flicker of fear in Tom's eyes. "You kept her in a shed," Lucas said. "You beat your daughter. You buried the truth with a shovel and thought no one would dig it up." Tom stepped forward. "You've got no proof." Buddy stepped between them, and that's when it happened. Tom lunged, angry, fists clenched, and Buddy leapt, not to attack, but to knock him down. To stop him. Just like he had a year ago, Lucas pulled out his phone. The camera had been rolling the entire time. The threats, the confession, the aggression. It was all there. When the sheriff arrived 10 minutes later, there was no debate. Tom Carter was arrested on multiple counts: child abuse, unlawful confinement, and obstruction of justice. The town of East Pine went silent, and then it wept. People apologized to Emily, to Lucas, to Elise, and quietly, to Buddy. But Buddy didn't care for apologies. He only cared for one thing: her, Emily. The moment she heard the news, she didn't cry. She simply walked out of her hospital room, into the lobby, and called out one word: "Buddy." He turned the corner, limping slightly, fur brushed clean, eyes wide. She ran. And for the first time in nearly a year, they were whole. The reunion wasn't loud. It was soft. He licked her face gently. She hugged his neck, whispering, "You came back," as if he'd ever left. They said dogs couldn't testify, that emotions weren't evidence, that fur and loyalty couldn't stand in court, that a bark, a growl, or even a heroic act meant nothing unless it could be measured, analyzed, sworn under oath. But what they didn't understand was that Buddy had already spoken, louder than most humans ever do. And now, it was time for the truth to echo. The courtroom was packed, small town, big noise. Emily Carter's story had traveled beyond East Pine. News vans lined the street, every seat filled, not because people wanted spectacle, but because they wanted closure. Or maybe because they couldn't believe they missed the signs. Emily sat beside Lucas, small and quiet. Her therapist and Marion Green were there too. The prosecutor took the stand with a folder full of drawings, photographs, timestamps, and statements. They laid it all bare: the missing reports, the shed, the claw marks, the child's confession, the bloody locket, the camera footage of Tom Carter threatening Lucas. The defense pushed back, called it circumstantial, claimed the child was traumatized and confused. But the room shifted when Emily asked to speak. 9 years old, thin, scared, but her voice didn't waver. She spoke about the night Buddy was kicked, about running into the woods barefoot, about building a home out of sticks and blankets, about waking up to a cold nose and a warm body every morning, about how she didn't just survive out there. She was saved because of one dog, a dog the town had ignored, feared, dismissed. She held up the drawing she'd made, the one they'd found behind the shed wall. "I drew this the night he came back for me, when I thought no one else would." The room was silent. Even the defense attorney looked down. But it was when Buddy was led into the courtroom that everything changed. He wasn't on a leash. Just walked quietly beside Lucas, eyes alert but calm, his coat still healing, his limp less noticeable. When Emily saw him, she stood from the witness chair and knelt beside him. He wagged his tail once and gently placed a paw in her lap. No words that I know. Speech, just a moment of truth no one could deny. The judge cleared his throat, visibly emotional. "In all my years on this bench, I have never seen a testimony more honest than this." 2 hours later, the verdict came in: guilty on all counts. Tom Carter would never walk free again. And Emily, she finally did. That evening, as dusk settled over East Pine, the town gathered in the park, not for a protest, not for a vigil, but for something they all needed: redemption. A small stage was set. At the center, a plaque covered with a velvet cloth. Emily stood beside it, one hand on Buddy's back. Lucas took the mic, spoke softly. This dog was abandoned, thrown away, just like the truth in Emily's story. But he didn't give up. He didn't walk away. He stayed, protected, waited, even when no one else listened. He looked at Emily, then slowly pulled the cloth away. The plaque read, "To the protector without a badge. To the witness without a voice. To the dog who stayed. Thank you, Buddy." The crowd stood in silence, then applause, then tears. People approached, slowly, petting Buddy, thanking Emily, offering apologies they didn't know how to speak. Elise, the old vet, whispered, "You're a better soul than most men I've ever met." Buddy just wagged his tail. That night, Emily and Buddy sat under the stars together for the first time in safety. No more howling wind, no more hiding. Just a girl and her dog, free. But as they sat in the quiet, Lucas couldn't help but wonder, why? Did Buddy come back to the town? Why now? And where had he been all those months before he led them to her? That answer was still waiting in the shadows, because some heroes don't stop when the battle is won. Some stay behind for one last clue. The days after the trial passed like morning fog, slow, quiet, hard to hold. Emily was home, for real this time. Not just in a house, but in a place where she could sleep with both eyes closed. Where no yelling echoed from behind locked doors. Where her footsteps didn't need to be silent, but he stayed close. Always nearby, always watching that he never barked without reason, that he never relaxed fully. Not yet. Lucas noticed it, too, that he'd seen animals after trauma, seen dogs flinch at sudden movement, tremble at certain smells. But this was different. Buddy wasn't afraid, he was waiting for something. Or someone. One evening, a week after the plaque was placed, Lucas saw it again. Buddy walked to the edge of the woods, the same line of trees where they first found Emily. He sat down, facing the trees. Silent. Still, Lucas walked up behind him. "You see something, boy?" Buddy didn't turn, just stared. Lucas followed his gaze, and in the distance, beneath a weeping pine, something glinted. The next morning, Lucas returned with a metal detector and a backpack. He didn't tell anyone. Not yet. The trail led past Hollow Creek, up a slope where only deer and time had traveled. And there, under an outcrop of moss-covered stone, he found what Buddy had sensed all along, a shallow grave, not fresh. Months old. Lucas's chest tightened. He called it in. Authorities arrived. So did the press. But what they uncovered wasn't just a buried secret. It was another child. A girl, NOID. No clothing except a torn pajama shirt. The medical examiner later determined she'd been dead almost a year. Malnutrition. Possible blunt trauma. No attempt to mark the grave. Just left, like trash. The town held its breath again. Had they missed more than one? Emily didn't know her. She hadn't seen another child in the woods. But the presence of that grave changed everything. And when Lucas returned home that night, Buddy was gone. Just like that, no paw prints, no note, no noise. Gone. Emily was heartbroken. She searched the backyard for hours, left food by the porch, slept with the door cracked open in case he returned. He didn't. Days turned into weeks. Lucas checked every trail camera in the county. Nothing. And then, on a foggy morning nearly 2 months later, something happened. Lucas was driving to town when he saw her, an old woman at the bus stop, holding a leash. At the end of it was Buddy, his coat a little longer, his walk a little slower, but unmistakable. Lucas pulled over fast, heart pounding. The woman looked up. "You know him?" Lucas nodded, stunned. "That dog saved a child's life." She smiled gently. "He showed up outside my trailer 5 weeks ago. Sat there for 2 nights before I let him in." "Where is this trailer?" Lucas asked. "Just outside Willow Creek," she said. "By the old rail yard." Willow Creek was 60 miles away. Lucas made the connection instantly. That was where another missing child case had gone cold 2 years ago. Lucas asked if she'd mind letting him take Buddy home. She shook her head. "He's not mine. He just needed to rest. I think he knew you'd come." When Buddy saw Lucas, he didn't run. He simply walked up and placed his head under Lucas's hand. That night, when Lucas brought him back to Emily, she burst into tears and hugged him tighter than ever. "You came back," she whispered. Again, Buddy just rested his head on her shoulder, and this time, he stayed, in no more pacing, in no more barking at invisible threats. Whatever had been chasing him was gone. Or maybe it had been faced. Lucas put it all together later. Buddy had left not because he was running, but because he was looking that he had found Emily. But he also knew there was another soul that hadn't been found. Another lost child buried in silence. And until that girl was seen, Buddy couldn't rest. Now he could. Emily began drawing again, smiling again. She and Buddy visited schools, shelters, rescue centers. They told their story together. A girl who never gave up, and a dog who never let go. Buddy became more than a town legend. He became a symbol dot of the unheard, the unseen, the ones who wait in silence, hoping someone will care enough to listen. Years later, when Emily was older, she would write a book that she'd title it Silent Paws, Loud Clues, and in the dedication, she'd write, "To the one who heard my cries when no one else did, who guarded my dreams, who waited even when the world walked away. Thank you, Buddy. You were never just a dog. You were my truth." And in a quiet park in East Pine, beneath a tree that now blooms every spring, there's a small statue of a mutt with one ear torn that he's sitting, still, watching, just in case someone else ever gets lost. Because sometimes the loudest clues come from the quietest pause.